Hello, welcome to another ESI Technologies training video. Today we're going to concentrate on the Baumann 84,000 diaphragm sanitary control valve. The object of this video is to show you how to take the valve apart, inspect it for damage, how to fit a new diaphragm, and how to set the valve up correctly and test it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the positioner and the pipe work from the actuator, and I'll come back to you as soon as we have that done. Now we've removed the positioner. It's a DVC 2000 field view positioner. Because there's no linkages, it uses a magnet to give you feedback into the back of the DVC here. There's only one bolt here on the bracket holding it to the side of the actuator. So it's easy to take off and fit and retrofit. Now our next job is to remove the actuator from the valve stem. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen the two lock nuts here, run them down to the end of the thread and lock them again, remove our magnet, and once we have that done, we'll screw the stem up into the actuator to release the pressure that's on the diaphragm. So I get my two 13mm spanners. Release. There's our magnet. Screw the two nuts down to the end. Lock them together. And screw our stem clockwise up in to the actuator yoke to take the pressure off. Now the next thing to do is we get a punch and a hammer and we loosen the lock nut. Screw that off. Then we unscrew the actuator from our stem. Okay, so now we have our actuator removed from the valve, and here's our valve. The next thing to do is to remove the four studs here holding down the bonnet onto the body. Right, here we are, we've taken off the body. Here is our diaphragm. So what we're going to do now is we're going to push the stem down on a soft surface, lift our diaphragm, and then unscrew. Okay, now we've removed our diaphragm. The next thing is to remove the circlip holding the wave springs and the compressor plate. So you put your thumb over it there to make sure it doesn't take off across the room. It's fine. Remove the drive plate. Here are our two wave springs, and this is our drive mechanism. Okay, so that's it. That's our stem. See, there's a wedge on the end of that which pushes these two bearings out, pushes these two in, and that's what drives onto the bottom of the compressor plate and opens and closes the diaphragm. So now that we have everything off, we check for any scratches or any dents on the diaphragm, any fractures, any tears. It's recommended that if you strip the valve out anyway, that you replace the diaphragm. Now, to help you with this, in conjunction with the training video, if you go into our website, if you go into documentation on the 84,000, there you'll find a works instruction which gives a detailed setup of what we're doing here with photographs that you could, a guide that you can follow through. Right, we've finished everything here. Right, it's just a matter of cleaning down all our bits, getting ready. If you're replacing your wave springs, you can replace those. Circlip is okay. What you're looking for on a worn valve is you're looking for on the back of the compressor plate where the bearings touch. You're looking for wear or scoring. If it's damaged, replace it. If there's scoring on it, the chances are the bearings here in the drive mechanism are sticking or worn. So it's a good idea, if this isn't free or you're feeling any roughness, replace that as well. As I've already said, replacing the diaphragm would be recommended if you've stripped the valve out. So what we're going to do now is in reverse. We're going to put the valve back together again. So in the bottom of the valve bonnet here, you can see a recess. Okay. The drive mechanism sits into that recess. So you push it down until it's square and sitting inside there. Can get a bit messy at times, a bit fiddly. Very important you check and make sure it's right. If it's not, your valve is not going to settle properly. So here we have it in. I've opened back the two bearings. They go right up against the wall and they're even all round. There's a swivel on the wedge on the end of the stem, so that will automatically slot into place. Our next job is to put back in the compressor. Right, make sure that sits down fully. Or wave springs. Putting in the wave springs on the 1 inch, 1.5 inch has 2 wave springs. The larger sizes have 3. So when you're putting them back in, it's the curve facing up, the high part of the curve facing up, and where the gap is on the wave springs, 180 degrees between them. Once you have that in, your circlip. Now this is a good point to say that if your valve is not assembled correctly, you're going to have terrible problems trying to force your circlip back into place. Make sure it's in its reset all the way around. As you can see, I've had no problem slipping that back in with my thumb. The next thing to do, with all these cleaned off and you're fitting a new diaphragm, is you have to use a lubricant on the inside of the diaphragm to stop the elastomer from sticking to the steel. Okay, so as this is just a training video, I'm not going to go to all that much trouble. Now, on a soft surface again, I push my stem down, this guy comes out. Screw my new diaphragm with my new lubricant on. Screw him down, good and tight, hand tight, and then just bring him back about 1/8 of a turn, just to take the pressure off so that the diaphragm isn't distorted. It'll give us trouble later on when we're trying to do the bubble test. So that's it. Our valve is fully assembled again. We put it back on. Next, we put in our 4 bolts, tightening these bolts diagonally, and also when you've complete tightening them, you torque these bolts to the figure that you will see on the works instruction. It'll give you the detail on that. Right, we've tightened up our 4 bolts diagonally. We've torqued them up to 21 pounds-feet or whatever torque for the particular valve that you're using. Once that's done, we're ready to put back on the actuator. Now, we don't want to put any load or any spring pressure on the diaphragm just yet. All we need to do is reassemble, and then we'll go about doing our bench set. So with that in mind, first thing to do is we get our actuator, our washers, and set them back here, run it down the thread, careful not to cross thread it, so get it started. Screw the stem all the way back up into the actuator, so we don't have any pressure on the diaphragm yet. So we put back on our lock nut, screw that up, make sure our actuator orientation is facing in the right direction. In this case it isn't, and because we have a swivel on the stem and the wedge, we can turn it quite easily. So lock or lock nut. Put back our assembly, assembled valve, actuator connected up, tightened up, orientation right. The next thing to do is to set it up to set the bench set on the valve. Basically the bench set, if you look at the plate here on the top, on most of the more modern valves, it's on the side on the older ones, you'll see a bench set. In this case, it's 5 to 15 psi, and basically that means that there's a minimum load of 5 psi on the springs facing down onto the diaphragm to keep the valve shut against the process pressure. When 15 psi is reached in the actuator, the valve is fully open. So you're going from 5 psi to 15 psi, from closed to open. So we need to set that up. So what we do is we're going to connect up a device there with a pressure gauge that I'll show you in a few minutes. And we're going to put 5 psi in here. And once that 5 psi is held in here, we're going to adjust that stem so the valve is closed and it's bubble tight. And we check that by putting 50 psi pressure upstream of the valve into the valve, and then we check to make sure that the valve isn't passing on the outside. Once we get that right, we lock the stem and our mechanical side of the valve then is complete. Okay, just to show you what I have here, I have a panel made up here with two regulators, fine tuned regulators, two calibrated gauges. One will do for my actuator for my 5 to 15, and the other one will do for my pressure test on the diaphragm, which will require 50 psi. So what I'm going to do, or what I have here, is I have two sanitary locks, two blank ends drilled and tapped with two compression fittings here for my hose. Works your while if you're doing a lot of these to get a setup like this, and makes the job an awful lot easier. So to start with, I'm going to go to my 5 psi, right? So that gives me my bench set, my minimum on the bench set. And then I'm going to gradually, as the valve is probably passing, maybe not, let me see. This is on the downstream, and the upstream I'm putting in 50 psi. Small bit there now. Okay, so we're just getting a bubble there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw this down until it stops. I'm just getting a slight bit. There we go. Up a bit tight into that. So I'm screwing my stem down until the bubble stops, and then once we have that done, check again, 50 psi, acting on the diaphragm, nothing coming out on the other side, so we know our valve is sealed. So if I increase the pressure in my diaphragm, I should start to see that pass. There we are, just kicked off there, 5 psi. Valve opens, 6. There we go. So now we know the mechanical side of our valve is set up correctly. Just above the bench set of 5 psi, valve starts to flow. When it closes below 5 psi, we have no flow, so we have a bubble tight shut off. So I'm just going to put my magnet back, loosen my two stem lock nuts, run these up by hand. Put in my stem. Right, now that we've that done, take our water out of the way, take off our gauges, reduce the pressure, take our tri-clamps off, right. Next thing is to remove our airline from our actuator. Okay, that's our valve fully assembled. We've put back on the positioner and connected up with pipe work. The only thing left to do is an autocal, and I've already done a video on DVC 2000 on how to do an autocal. Relatively simple with a smart positioner. It's just a matter of pushing a few buttons. Again, my name is Joe Walsh, and if you need to contact me or if you have any questions, you can also contact me through the website. Thank you.